Hi, welcome to McColl Center's Virtual Artist Talk of American Honey, which is an amazing show we have here up until September 15th. Taylor Lee Nicholson curated this show, and we have them here. And Taylor has been a wonderful part of McColl Center for almost 3 years now, a studio artist, had a wonderful solo show last year, and was able to bring together this wonderful group of artists for this show. I'm Doris Kapner, the program director here, and I'm just going to hand it over to Taylor.
Thanks, Doris. And thank you to McColl for having us during this exhibition. This is a really important exhibition, mainly because it's the first all-queer, like intentionally all-queer roster that McColl has had intentionally as a show before, and it coincides with Charlotte Pride. So that's really, really exciting for us, especially here in Charlotte, where this is still a little alternative compared to other parts of the country. So yeah, I'm Taylor Lee Nicholson. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a practicing artist as well. A lot of the artists that I included in the show are artists that I met at other shows across the country, either via other nonprofits like Mosaic Project in upstate New York or Belger Art Center in Kansas City, and also Spring Break. A lot of us are Spring Break alumna. And it's just been really fun to work with all my friends. I'm going to go down the roster here in a minute and get you introduced to everyone who's here. But the entire roster is 10 artists, and everyone is some sort of queer. There's a lot of trans identities amongst this group as well, which is really exciting. I personally am a non-binary individual who identifies as trans. So that to me was really important to kind of uplift proudly in this show. And the show is really looking at Americana through the queer lens. So that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. We're going to talk about what exactly do we mean when we say Americana, queer lens, and how does everybody's individual works kind of like apply to that in some way, shape, or form. So to introduce you to the artist, we have Catalina Cheng, who's not here this evening, but Catalina is a ceramicist based in Atlanta, Georgia. And then Nic Dyer is up next. Nic, if you would introduce yourself to everybody, please. Oh, you're muted. Rookie.
Yes. I've never been on the internet before. I'm Nic Dyer. My pronouns are they, them. I'm from the South, but also mostly the East, and I'm currently in Hudson, New York. And I'm a painter.
Yes, I became familiar with Nic's work because of Instagram. At some point, I came across a painting that just honestly inspired me so much because Nic incorporates a lot of sculpture into their painting works, which we're going to dig into a lot later. And then we also have Cassidy Early, who is based in Chicago, and James Parker Foley, who is based in Portland, Maine. And then Danielle Klebes is also from the Hudson area of New York, correct?
Yeah, I'm in Wassaic, New York. I'm Danielle Klebes. My pronouns are she, her. Wassaic, and I'm also a painter.
Yes, fantastic. I'm always jealous of everything that Wassaic is doing, and Danny is a huge part of that in the most recent years. And it's really, really exciting to collaborate with you on this. I know we've been talking about collaborating in other ways as well. So anyway, also Danny is the artist who has made this piece that we were using as our hero graphic for the entire show. So most people at this point have seen your work, and we're going to dive in a little deeper in a moment. We also have Lane and Riah Lange. Both are documentarians based here in Charlotte. They've contributed film and photography to this exhibition, which we're going to take a peek at later. And then we have Paul Maloney. If you would introduce yourself, Paul.
Sure. Hi, my name is Paul. Pronouns are he, they. I presently am living and residing and making work in Kansas City, Missouri, but I was born in Texas, raised mostly in the South and the East End by way of a full-blown East Coast family, making a lot of the New York and East Coast area feel very home as well. and I am a ceramicist.
Yeah, I feel like we have a lot of Southern identities represented here as well, even though everyone's kind of spread out at this point in their lives. And I think that Southern identity is quite present in the work. Yeah.
For sure.
And we also have Marianna Peragallo.
Hello. I'm Marianna. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm Brazilian American. That's my the short version. The longer version is that I was born in Brazil, but then spent most of my I grew up in the South mostly. I was in different parts of the South, like Virginia, Georgia. Went to high school in Mississippi, and now I'm in Brooklyn, New York, where I've been for 14 years, or I've been in New York for 14 years. And I'm a sculptor, most recently making kinetic sculptures with thermoplastic.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful work. And it's what we see when we first walk in the gallery and people from the street can see the little bag spinning around. And it's been definitely a piece that's pulling a lot of people in. And I met Marianna because we were in a booth side by side at Spring Break LA last year. So we just so happens to be placed next to each other, and the proximity was actually a blessing. Yes, it was wonderful. Yes. And we also have Colin Radcliffe in the show as well, who is currently, I believe, moving from Paris to Rio de Janeiro. So he's quite busy, but we'll be talking about his work as well, especially related to yours, Marianna, because he also does some twists on pop culture, which I find really, really interesting. So anyway, yeah, we have gone through the entire roster. Yes. So the show's cohesion, we've been already hinting at a lot. There's a lot of Americana happening across the board. There's this distinctly queer identity, obviously, a very trans, non-binary identity going on in here too. And then also a lot of Southern vibes. And I think that it can be sometimes hard to put into words what we're doing with art. If it's like Georgia O'Keeffe said, if I could put it into words, then I wouldn't need to paint. But we're going to try to do that. So I wanted to check out some of the work and start talking about some of our materials and processes and how those are kind of influencing and adding some meaning and importance to our themes. So I want to start by talking about the ceramicists, because we have a lot of ceramics in the show. I am also a ceramicist in a way. I guess I consider myself more of a sculptor. However, I come from the painting world, and I know that Catalina Cheng and Paul Maloney are approaching things a little bit more traditionally, but y'all are also bringing such a beautiful, unique spin to it that feels very contemporary and very, I would say, punk. Those of you who have seen the show have seen that Catalina Cheng also is working with tattoo. So they have these tattoo skins in the show, which are pretty amazing. This is silicone skin, and they're practicing tattoos. So these were really applied to the tattoo gun, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And they're using their iconic imagery. These horses are lesbians are a really famous thing that Catalina's been working with, a specific to their vocabulary, I guess you would say. But then, Paul, I know that when you're working with your ceramics, you are bringing in a lot of glazing techniques that are highly chemical. And I'm sure we don't want to get super into the actual nitty gritty of that right now. But I would love to hear you talk a little more about what's inspired you to work in ceramics in the first place and to approach it in this way.
Well, first, thanks, Taylor, for putting this entire show together, and also to give us an opportunity for all of us to share all of these kind of ideas and not just material things, but themes with one another. When it comes to this work, I think when it came to pottery, I fell into it as a means to kind of kinesthetically just have my hands invested in something, and that's the best way for me to learn, I think. And I found that out in high school in 2006. I was taking some selected courses that I got to choose for myself for the first time, and then that led me to, in college, when I was bouncing between Georgia Southern University and University of Georgia, that was kind of the first years where I really started recognizing like, oh, I, can really sink my teeth into this. And this is a thing that not only holds my attention for long enough to feel invested in wanting to learn it to the T, but it also allows me to flex in the same way that you were saying with that Georgia O'Keeffe quote. There's a lot of things that I would try to convey in song, within writing, that I was trying within other majors. It just wasn't coming to fruition, and ceramics allowed me to do that. So, and then when it came to just the aesthetic and how those choices came about, I got very lucky. And when it came to the luck of the draw of Athens, Georgia, I had a lot of Korean professors that all just decided to get really hardcore about a lot of just the unity molecular formula and kind of the ground up of how you can work the process of the material to then form your idea if you just get married with it enough. And I've just been keeping it ever since.
I love that you brought up like songwriting and that sort of thing, because when I was taking notes on what you were saying, and I was thinking about 06, and I'm like, all right, Fall Out Boy is coming out with From Under the Cork Tree. We have Pete Wentz with The Bangs. We have All American Rejects. I was in high school writing like song lyrics in colored pencil on college ruled paper, and you can really see that influence, I think, in your work, that like songwriting bent, not just from the lyrics, but also this kind of, would you describe the style of your text as like graffiti, or is there a better word for it?
I think it's certainly graffiti influenced. I think that there's a wonderful kind of exposure that I had with having to move so frequently. Before Kansas City, I moved like 22 times, and that also includes the city. And so I just kept going from college campus to urban environment to college campus to urban environment. And then when I fell into my ceramic community, a lot of them were interested in a lot of black sumi ink painting of their own kind, where they're doing more figurative drawing and they're doing things in a more representational manner. But I fell in love with that same mimicry of mark making, also because ink to ceramics is a great one-to-one. It's a very water-based applique that has a very dry-based material that you can feel within the brush that you're kind of having go across the surface, whether that's on clay or on paper or on canvas. So those sort of one-to-one relationships of the material were really helpful. But graffiti does come into there for sure. I can't deny that I lived West Side Atlanta when I was growing up in high school, and that there was a lot of moments where the punk and the hip hop community were overlapping. And technically, if you wanted to get into nitty gritty about specific words and letters, like I do have a specific choice for each one. So I choose my cursive Y's because I was really frustrated that cursive was being taken out of the academic system. I choose /O's that are zeros to recognize that we're in the digital era, but I'm still going to do it with my hand. I like a backwards E that has a slash through it because I'm not Basquiat, and I hate that everyone cops that all the time. It's really annoying in graffiti, and everyone burns it to the death. And so it's like, good God, can we not have another bar that pops into there? So, I have this, each letter seems like it could be really fast moving, but I do have a choice for every specific character. Even in a really kind of punk rock, whatever, mom and dad, all of my T's are upside down crosses because we already have enough right side up crosses in history. Why not balance the scales?
Oh my God. I'm obsessed with everything you're saying. It's like we're getting into glyphs. I'm even thinking about as you're speaking, I'm thinking about you would see graffiti on in Atlanta. Is it the Metro?
Oh yeah, MARTA for sure. Yeah,
MARTA.
You can go full circle on MARTA back in the day in Atlanta, early thousands. You were blowing everyone's mind. There was Acer back in the day that was hitting that up. And then when Krog Street was still in existence before it got gentrified via the Beltline, that was holy ground. Holy ground.
Yeah. Oh my God. So if you think about it, the MARTA itself is a vessel, is it not? I love that you're applying these things to vessels as an idea. Because I think that something like graffiti, something like wheel thrown vessels, which I know that you hand build as well, but just speaking specifically about, wheel throwing or something like graffiti, these are art forms that are typically thought of as craft and therefore it's placed lower down on a list of what should be considered or taken seriously, even though we know as artists that wheel throwing is extremely hard and people spend their whole lives doing this, and graffiti is something that takes a ton of skill. You can't just, I mean, you can have access into it, but in order to perfect, like you were talking about, all your lettering, all your glyphs, that sort of thing, perfecting this form is actually taking like a ton of work. And so I'm really glad that we're elevating it up to where it should be amongst other supposedly highbrow art forms.
Yeah, and it's getting noticed now. I mean, you know, when Nike's pushing a graffiti agenda, that things are getting popular enough to where you can have it around, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so fun too. I know Doris at McColl will appreciate this, that you're applying it to something like porcelain, which is a very traditional, like highbrow material. So that tension in your work, I find, is a lot of fun. And I see that in Catalina's work as well, because Catalina is taking the idea of like a traditional ginger jar or the, you know, Chinese food dogs, and then kind of putting that unique contemporary spin on it. So you're approaching something that's traditional, but you're kind of pulling in like a lowbrow thing to it as well. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we scoot on? I mean, that was a very meaty sandwich you just served up there.
Yes, I'll keep it tight right there, and we should move on before I start talking too much.
We'll definitely be coming back to you, I'm sure. I mean, we're all related in some way here. I wanted to dive into some of the pop culture. I mean, I guess speaking of graffiti and that, you know, song lyrics and that sort of thing that can relate certainly to pop culture. I know a lot in my own work, if I'm referencing like a Britney Spears lyric, then part of why I'm doing that is because I'm trying to use something that people might recognize in order to then, like, as an entry point to talk about something else. So I am certain that appeals to you, Marianna. I know you use a lot of smiley face iconography in your work. It's not the only thing, of course, but let's start with the bags.
Yes,
I've had a conversation with you about the bags, but I want to hear you talk with everyone about how they're subverting their assigned roles, which is so queer, let's say.
So queer. I mean, first of all, this one doesn't have eyebrows, but I have a bag like this that has eyebrows, which I'm like, for why? For what is the reason for the eyebrows? Like, I don't know. It's really crazy looking. Anyway, plastic bags, right? So basically, I mean, I live in New York. I'm from São Paulo. Plastic bags are everywhere. They're kind of like, I mean, I don't want to say that they're very much a part of the New York landscape. They're like the New York tumbleweed. You know, they're like, I mean, I hate to be like, I feel like everybody thinks of the Katy Perry song, which, like, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it. But it's like, you know, the plastic bag that's like, when there's like a gust of wind, it like literally gets like swept up, and it does like the little dance in the air. It's like shuffling across the sidewalk, and like I see them everywhere. And so, you know, I think like I think like in my work, you know, forever, like I've always paid attention to things that I thought were kind of like not really paid attention to, or that were like peripheral. And I think that became a little more sharpened during the pandemic when I was home all the time and, you know, working remotely. And like, so I just started to kind of like pay closer attention to like the things in my home. And then, you know, over the last couple of years, that's extended to like my cityscape. And, you know, like anthropomorphizing them and then letting them like misbehave. And I think a lot about glitching and like, you know, what it like, I don't know, like they're cute, but they're also like a little bit sinister, these bags. You know, they're a little insincere. You know, it's like, thank you, have a nice day. But it's like they're I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like Do you like? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like, they're little, like, saccharine, and yeah, it's kind of fun for me to like let them, like, they're not going to be the like containers for our takeout or our groceries, but they're going to like spin endlessly or like be a fountain. Like one of my other sculptures in the show is just like a bag that's kind of draped over cinder blocks and is like doing the most pathetic little spit, and it's called Fountain. And so like I'm like, all right, like let's like change the dynamic, change the relationship. Instead of them being like disposable and like in our service, like they're gonna do their own thing. Like they're gonna get to live their own truth as dictated by me, I guess. But that's
Marianna, you mentioned in the beginning of your when you started speaking about maybe something like using pop culture. I think about it as using pop culture as a, like, time, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I do.
I was just thinking about the plastic bag in the Katy Perry, and then also that makes me think immediately about the plastic bag in American Beauty, which
Yes.
is like,
oh my God, I forgot about that.
right, which
Wait,
is
I
like
have to write
40
that down.
plus years ago.
Wow,
and how
that
we
just like triggered the archive in such a way.
And just like how this same bag has been going on for so long.
Yeah, I mean, it's in different languages
tumbling.
too. Like, I have one back here that like there's no way you can well, I don't know. It's like it's tiny, but it's like a deconstructed plastic bag, and it's from São Paulo, and it's like the same thing where it's like the smiley, and it's just like the translation is like come back often, like have a nice day. Like that's so, but it's like the same idea, same messaging. And then they kind of take like a person, like, there is this like the pop culture thing, but then there's like, and like just something that you see all the time, something that's very like pervasive and like just like in our daily lives in the periphery. But then like they're also like the plastic bag that I was just referencing that's like not in the show. It's like, that carried the last meal that I ever had with my grandmother. Like, so there's like, I feel like there's like, those are like the things that I try to like bring into the work. There's always like a personal component, or they're like characters, or they're like working on something that maybe I'm working on myself, which I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for the group, but I feel like we all kind of do that a little bit in our work. Or like, it's like whatever you're thinking about, it's like what's going to come out in the work.
Yeah.
And,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're saying so many. I mean, I have like literally like 10 things that I could just go in directions, 10 different directions.
Let's do it. Let's take a tendril and let's
I
go on
know.
that tangent.
I'm just something that I feel like relates to a lot of the other work in the show. I'm very struck by the fact that your bags are often vessels. You use them for plants, and then sometimes they are empty vessels, which is interesting in and of itself when we're thinking about, the body and things like that. But then honestly, it's something that I've had this conversation with you before where I've thought like they're so cheerful and they're so silly, and yet at the same time there is a little bit of something that's just like a little off. And I think maybe that's because I associate with plastic bags with things like consumerism and like over shopping, or I think we're taught that like, oh, takeout's bad for you. Everyone should be cooking their own meals, or like there's all this messaging, this complicated messaging tied up in a plastic bag. But then I hear you.
It's like all the things, like all of that.
Yeah, and hearing you talk about like having a specific bag, because one, I'm not sure that people understand that these are actual bags. So we should talk about that. But to bring the point back around, you mentioned one of the bags that you're using specifically being related to like the last meal that your grandmother ate. So it just takes this like really emotional turn out of something that is already associated with, like, say, Katy Perry or, you know, shopping or something like that. But it becomes in your work this vessel for like a spirit or a soul, you know?
That's really touching. Thank you. But yeah, I'm trying to think of where to like pick up with that, but like
maybe the fact that they are actual bags.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah, I was like, whoa. Right. So I collect these bags from like either, like around the city, or like I've started having like friends be like, oh, I got a really good one today. Like I brought it for you. I'm like, oh, thank you. So I have like a whole collection of these bags, you know, like from like my neighborhood, like bodegas, like whatever. Like I collect them from like a series of places in New York and in Sao Paulo. And then I've been using this material called thermoplastic, which is like a heat malleable plastic. So yeah, I'm able to like take this, you know, they're like, here's a favorite right now. But you know, they're like very like flimsy and thin, and I essentially laminate them. So like I deconstruct the bag and then like kind of like sandwich it between two I mean, it's like a whole, you know, thing. And then I like cut it out and melt it like slowly but surely so that I can then reform it into a bag and then like shape it to have like the gesture that I want, where it's like, you know, or like kind of draping over something, or like, I can then like make it do the thing that I want it to do. And like a lot of them, like I'm trying to think of like how I don't remember like why I wanted to make like the first plastic bag that I made, but like the first like bag with plant, for example, like, which like I know that there's not one in the show. But that literally came from just like throwing out, like one of my partner's family members had, you know, he passed away, and we were like taking stuff out of the house in, you know, like it was like donations and trash were all like going out in like trash bags. And then like one of the things that I ended up bringing home with me was like his plant. And so I don't really know like where the wire, like it's like, so I like somehow like somewhere in the processing of all of this, I was like, I should put this plant, like I'm going to make a trash bag sculpture for this plant. And then it kind of changed like it became like a collaborative relationship too, where it's like, I made this sculpture, but now I have to like take care of it. And so it shifts the focus. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting that like now it's like, not only is it not just a trash bag, but I also have to like we are collaborators and like caring for this thing. Like, and so, I mean, the thing about the bags is like vessels, like I don't have enough, like, I can't really talk about this, but I guess I can just leave this nugget. But like if all my sculptures are characters, I feel like in some ways, like the bags are like I've been thinking a lot about them recently, where like they're a little harder to pinpoint for me. And I'm like, oh, maybe that's like the me character. And I kind of can't, I don't know like how to like really get into that at the moment, but I'm like, you know, so so they have a little bit of that, like, they're like joyful and cheerful and sort of like cute on the front end, but like, you know, maybe there's a lot of other stuff going on too, you know, they're a little fucked up in the way that capitalism and consumerism and plastic and recycling and all of that stuff is. So
and I love that your work kind of, I mean, I think good art asks questions, so it's okay to not have like a specific answer in mind. But I do think that your work is kind of presenting like an option of like, this is the world that we have. It's a little messed up. This thing's bad, this thing's bad, this thing's bad. Everywhere you turn, something's pretty awful. But then you're kind of presenting the option of like, what about collaboration? Like, what is something we can do? Can we collaborate? Can we take care of each other? Can we take care of these things that are otherwise outcasts, thrown to the side? You're taking literal detritus from the street and like rescuing it and elevating it, which I don't know if you're aware of this connection. It feels like you have to, but I mean, your piece called Fountain, is that not a callback to Duchamp, the original, I mean, our father of the found object?
A little bit. I mean, it's a little like, I thought it was like a little on the nose, but I was like, fuck it, we're doing it.
Yes. What is Duchamp if not a little on the nose? But yeah, I love this, like, you know, picking up something that is considered trash, or even just like preserving something that, I don't know, you know, maybe a restaurant who's using these bags genuinely has this sentiment of like, thank you for coming and supporting my small business. And yeah, you're kind of proposing this way of life that's a bit more about care. And I think that's how it, one, relates to other materiality in the show, like something like, you know, Maloney's vessels that are pinch pot, that like physical manipulation of something with your hands, and that's it, very human in a way that machines can never do. But then also this like this idea of queerness and how we honestly as a community have this idea of chosen family, and we have to take care of each other because for so long we have been pushed to the side. And I, you know, obviously makes me want to tie that connection to trash, that idea of being thrown away. I know it's probably horrible to quote Charles Manson on this, but he's the person who came, I'm being me, he came up with the term garbage person. He said, you know, you have your garbage on the street, we are the garbage people. A lot of people, when they feel like garbage, they turn to violence or something like that, but your work's turning toward care. Do you have anything else you want to add before we loop in Nic? Because I actually think that some of what Nic is doing really relates a lot to your process.
Let's do it. Let's loop them in.
All right. So we'll come back to talking about Colin in a moment.
This whole time, I'm like so excited about trash.
I know. I'm like, I gotta start talking. We gotta start talking to Nic if we're gonna talk about trash. So, so yes, Nic, your work is honestly some of my favorite work of all time. It's in part because you're very playful with your materiality. I mean, this piece in particular, Forage, which is in the show, I'm in love with. I love that you created so much of what's on here, and the details are like absolutely magnificent. I mean, we've got like chewed gum wads, which I don't think are actual gum wads, are they? Or you made them?
It's Sculpey that I did chew.
Oh my God. Yes. Tell us more about your project, because you're taking this like this idea of trash, but I mean, you could have done found object, and sometimes you do with like a sticker or something, but many times you're actually like, you're creating something to look like a found object.
Yeah, like thinking about Marianna's work and how much of it is process based and also materials based. I'm obsessed with materials so much. I love playing. So I, at one point, decided to just make everything I wanted to be in the work myself, which is how some of these things happened. Like the gum, it made sense to chew on some Sculpey. Also thinking about like archivally, like what's going to happen to gum. If it's real, I don't know. I don't want like stuff to eat the paintings. So I didn't really want to put actual candy in the work. So I spent like almost 2 entire residencies. So maybe this was like 4 months making candy out of Sculpey that I just like now have as a material like next to my paint. With these 2 pieces, these 2 pieces were from my show Breadcrumb, which I did February about 2 years ago at Hashimoto Contemporary. I was able to have so much fun with materials. I was really focusing on making dirt and rocks and sand myself, and like ways that I could do that. So shout out to Guerra Paints, but I was able to like come up with my own sand that I'm super proud of. And I also like used like rubber tire for dirt. The sand is like crushed ceramics. The rocks are clay that were painted, stuff like that. And I made all of those, and I had help making about 1,000 tiny ants.
Oh my God. I'm like, I mean, also so struck by it. The thing that I wanted to zoom in on was what you were just saying about crushed ceramics. I love this idea that you destroyed something to make this.
Yeah, so I bought these materials. But I do love that idea. I did not crush my own ceramics, though. I bought them pre-crushed because within it is also crushed granite and crushed black mica. And that was my sand recipe.
I'm obsessed with rocks. This is something that won't surprise folks that know me as autistic, but I love geology. And granite is actually the state rock of North Carolina. Did you know that?
Oh, well, did you look at that?
And mica, it's volcanic, is it not? So it's just so interesting that this is what you used for your sand.
I'm upset. I became obsessed with mica in Baltimore when it was just like in the dirt, and I would just be like, "Why is the dirt shiny?"
Mm-hmm.
That's when I learned that it could just be in the dirt.
Oh my God!
I
love it.
I had never seen like mica dirt in Florida or anywhere. Yeah.
Oh, the shimmery volcanic glass.
Yeah, and there's like a street in Baltimore that's all that. So the whole street is just glittery, and it's the best. I love glitter.
Oh my God, the cleavage on mica is, to use a rock term, the cleavage. I mean, just wow, like it's very similar to Marianna, obviously, and where you're kind of zeroing in on something that people might not, or I mean, in this case, it's I mean, you're making your materials, and then the subject itself is a little bit more of the trash piece of the puzzle, because I think something like this might go on in the background of of a painting or something, but it's so interesting that you chose to like really focus on this moment, like almost blow up this kind of like small scale, somewhat ordinary moment, something mundane. Would you say more about your choice there?
Yeah. These are like the kinds of things that I focus on when I'm outside. I'm obsessed with how bugs exist in the world. I became like really into them just thinking about how bugs interact with fruit and how they sort of swarm. And they're all over this, like, I mean, I did the apple piece as well, which just has a gummy worm coming out of it, which is about Adam and Eve, but also just like evilizing is not a word. Food being portrayed as evil.
Evilizing is a word now.
Evilizing is now a word. I'm coming out.
You did it.
For that.
Yeah.
I confirm. Yeah, I like that. Or
the way that we evilize food, which is what my work's about. So with forage, with the ant piece, I wanted to snapshot this like moment that's probably happening in the background and just really give it its time and its platform. Ants are really cool, and the way that they are carrying little bits of food, passing them along to each other, and like are in this line, and then they all go underground into this whole like colony and then they feed from it is wild. And I love lines of bugs.
There's also something so queer in like
I just unmuted myself just to say that, just to be like queer.
Yes, I'm picturing them going down in their little nightclub. And wait, do ants also have queens? Or is that just bees?
I think ants have queens.
Yeah.
Someone is gonna watch this talk and be like, no, they don't. But
actually,
they have colonies. They're feeding the big ant, and ain't that something about our society?
Yeah, and it makes me think of the movie. I mean, technically, I would think of Aliens, the sequel where we find the mother and we have Ripley squaring off against the mother alien. And, Ripley is considered a lesbian icon. Headcanon is important when it comes to fandoms, and Ripley is up there with the queers.
I've never really thought about the genders of ants. Do ants
Does it matter?
No. There's the mother and then there's everybody else.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And honestly, this concept in general too of this group think is interesting because it can be devastating, as we've seen in recent years, but it is also, going back to what we were talking about with Marianna, this idea of collaboration is also a powerful thing. So maybe it's not necessarily good or evil. It's one of those things,
It could be a queer colony, and that's all we got. And it's very important to make if we really wanted to, I don't know, get into that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we do want to, I know you brought up evilizing food, which is probably part of what I related to a lot when I, as a person, just discovered your work, because just from my personal experience, I had an eating disorder when I was younger. And so I definitely had a hard relationship with food. And it took me many years to realize that some of what I was trying to do by controlling food in an anorexic type of way was trying to control my body and react to a lot of gender dysphoria that I was having. And so to me, the food journey has been linked so closely with my gender journey as well. And I'm not sure if you or anyone else would want to speak to that, because I do think that a lot of the imagery in the show involves a lot of food. And so I think it's important to note.
For me, all of my work is about recovery from disordered eating. It is an ongoing thing. I think that I would say a lot of relating it to queerness is that something I'm sort of starting to still get out of my brain is this male gaze, cis heteronormativity instilled in our brain that wants us to look a certain way. And how that is ingrained so deeply in our culture that you kind of don't even I didn't really start to realize it until later. And then I didn't really start to connect it to being queer and how my environment started to change when I started to have queer spaces and was no longer really thinking about this ideal / perfect body or anything, that I didn't have to think about it as much anymore. I don't think it's completely safe from aesthetic queer spaces, but I do feel I'm allowed to just be a person here that has a person body. And that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
The work is not at that point about that. The work is about the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Aesthetic.
Yeah. Art is like, I mean, we obviously have an eye for aesthetic in what we do. It's very, very important to us. Detail is super important to us. And no matter how you approach it, whether you're, slathering on letters like barbecue sauce or like Maloney does, or whether I know, Nic, you are meticulously painting each and every single one of these blades of grass. So aesthetic is important, but we've been continuing to circle this idea of vessels. And the body is ultimately this vessel. I know I struggle a lot with I wish I was just a floating brain, and like having a body is very distressing to me at times.
I have a body.
Yeah, it's so stressful to have a body. Oh my God. And so I think there's like a lot going on in there too. Obviously, our relationship with our body is so interesting as people, and then also as artists, because I think that we might all agree that we kind of approach life thinking specifically, like looking at life as an artist. We never really take the artist lens off, I don't think.
And with that, like the way that Marianna can look at a bag of trash and then suddenly have this like very extensive and intimate moment with it in the studio where she's like melting and combining, and this piece of trash is now a piece of art. I'm just thinking about how like we view everything like so critically though. Like a lot of the work in the show that I put of mine in the show are based off of well-known children's books or fables that I grew up with, that a lot of other people grew up with as well. What were we talking about?
Evil food, the body is a vessel.
Yes.
Ants.
Evil food, the body is a vessel. Just thinking about these, but like at this point, I went back to a lot of these stories that I knew as a kid. Like this one is Adam and Eve, which is just like the most basic of them that I feel like a lot of people know. The apple is what made us fall from the earth or whatever, from the earth into made us fall from made
Paradise.
us evil. No, the apple evil eyes us. And it was like a snake tempted Adam and Eve with it. All of those things, but it's just an apple. And I started to like I started to read a lot of children's books about food and look at them super critically and like think about their language and how like what happens in the story, the language, like the weird small messages, and a lot of it is about evilizing food. I think I meant to say demonizing. It finally just got here in my brain. But
evilizing shirts after this meeting, just to be clear. It's
evilizing. But I crowdsourced some of the stories that I have worked from, and a lot of people would send me their books that they were like, I loved this book as a kid. And then I would be like, oh, that book, like there's like is it a raccoon who wants jam toast for Francis? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I don't know that one.
It's like jam for Francis, and Francis is giving neurodivergent for sure. She really just wants to eat jam on toast like once. And then suddenly her family is like, well, now you have to eat it always and you can't eat the spaghetti. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Why did it go so hard? I know, but she's like, I want to eat it for every meal for like 3 days, but that doesn't mean I don't want to eat anything else ever again. And I was just thinking about like, if I was Francis and I wasn't allowed to eat the spaghetti anymore, then like, at what point does the jam and the toast become evil? And like, at what point do I now like crave it so badly that like I'm gonna binge on it? Like I'm like evilizing children's books for sure.
I mean, a lot of
They can be,
I know
there's so
that,
much there. Like there's so many dark children's books. That's like my favorite place to go. Like that's like my favorite. It's like I gotta check out the children's book section of every bookstore.
I hope to see more like queer children's books coming up.
Yeah, that aren't like about like that are just like that just are queer. That aren't like there's a queer character and we're gonna you know what I mean? Like
It's a whole queer family and everything's very chill and nice.
yeah, just like a story.
yeah.
Nothing's evil. Like
No.
they're just eating a picnic and they're loving it and they're eating whatever they want.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Honestly, I could totally see a series coming from you, Nick, of like, you know, board books. Like the point of the board book is that babies and like small children can touch things. I feel like that would be an incredible series for you.
We're also very tactile. That's relevant to my interests for sure.
Yeah, and I do think that like the children's book aspect of this is so related to what we're talking about too, because these are things that they are supposed to be teaching us about the world when we're young. And I know Doris from McColl, who is probably shaking the screen wanting to talk about Grimm's fairy tales because she grew up, she's German and grew up very influenced by the Grimm's fairy tales, which are, you know, they're meant as like warnings to kind of scare you straight, I guess. No pun intended there, but
I looked into Aesop's fables. Like I looked at a lot of those things, which there's a lot of evil fruit in those as well.
Which is so interesting too, given that fruit is the female part of a plant, right? It's right, and
critical thinking.
I know. It's just constantly the ovaries that we're punishing, huh?
Oh man, I didn't even think about that.
Yes.
Also, God forbid growth, right? Like God forbid growing.
Yes.
So, like I thought fruit was healthy, but then fruit became unhealthy. It's are straight people okay? I think about
Yes, I honestly yeah, I think about this a lot. I also think that we can obviously segue into talking about like, I mean, we've been talking about body as vessel, but then you know, there's fruit kind of relates to the body. If we're thinking about like the reproductive nature of a plant, which, you know, ends in fruit. And then also the body as a landscape, like it kind of connecting to like nature. I mean, we've not even looked, I don't think we've looked at a single piece that depicts a body, but we've been talking about bodies nonstop. And so to loop in Danny into the conversation, you've been so patient, Danny. So Danny has some work in the show that is related to, I mean, we have painters in the show in general, people who I would consider like a painter's painter, because it's just so obviously like rooted in these amazing painting techniques. And I feel like with a painting, if we're thinking about like a painter's painter, someone who's like really giving you an image to like think about, and the space in the painting, the image retreats that space back so that you're like immersed into a world. So we're not talking about Pollocks here. We're talking about figurative paintings and that sort of thing, which definitely relates to other people in the show too. We have Cassidy, who does these self-portraits that are also like it's a trans body amongst the landscape, and also James Parker Foley, whose work is heavily rooted in landscape. But then Danny here, we were talking about your work with QCTV this week about how these are not just geographical locations, but also thinking about them as psychological, like emotional landscapes as well. So I would love to hear you talk about not just your reason for even doing a series of work like this, but then also maybe pulling in some of that juiciness we've been talking about with the body.
Yeah. These pieces are, I think they're really rooted. I did like a whole series of these scenes around the same time, and it was, I've always been like very outdoorsy. But I think like when you're a kid playing in the woods, you get like very quickly classified as like tomboy or whatever. Like it's seen as like not feminine in a strange way. And then when I got like slightly older, I got really into like hiking, and I thru hiked the Appalachian Trail, and it's like only straight white bearded men. And then like something just happened. Sorry.
Oh, you good? We
Yeah.
can hear you.
Okay, cool. Like straight white bearded men, and then like I felt very sort of out of place in those environments. And I made this series of work. It was like I started doing these camping trips, like backpacking trips with a group of only queer people, and it like really changed my relationship to the woods, because it was like one of the first times where I was like, it felt like a reclaiming of spaces that I wasn't supposed to own. And it just like was sort of like a very sincere, joyful response to like inhabiting those spaces with other people who don't belong there or something. And I think that's kind of where this series started.
Yeah, the piece on the right, I think that one's called Past Life. And something that I've been talking about with a lot of people in the exhibit is the kind of double entendre that meaning might have, where this person's kind of floating down the river. Maybe they're, kind of like over it in a way, or maybe they're, maybe past life is thinking more about like in a past life or whatever. So I was curious, is that double entendre, is that intentional, or are we reading too deeply into something?
That one is pretty literal, like past life. I think we have a lot in common, Taylor. But just sort of like looking at like before coming out, like I came out pretty late. I came out at like 27. And before that I was married happily for a while. We were in a relationship for a long time. And I think it's like difficult when it's your best friend and then you are kind of like starting over at a later age. And that was just sort of like a response to things I left behind, because it did feel like sort of like a rebirth with like, for the first time ever, actually thinking about what I want versus what I'm supposed to be doing.
Oh my God, I relate so much. I'm currently, finalizing a divorce, and I was also married I was in a very like cishet presenting relationship, and he was my best friend. And then this idea of starting over this past year, it has been really intense. But it's exciting, but also you're seeing like this entire other life that you built for yourself, like stop and be deconstructed in a way. So yeah, there's a lot of conflicting feelings for sure, of excitement, but also grief.
Definitely. Yeah. I think my voice is kind of crazy, by the way. I was already texting Nick about this, but I literally choked like moments before this. So this whole time I've been like trying to get breaths, but my voice still sounds strange.
It does not to me. We are our toughest critics here. But yeah, I was curious if this is a self-portrait. I've been asked that a lot as well.
Yeah, it's like a very loose self-portrait. I gave myself a whole bunch of very cool tattoos that I don't have. I have some of them. But yeah, it was like loosely a self-portrait.
Yeah. I don't know who came up with this idea of the like landscape itself being this like metaphor for emotional landscapes. I know that I most recently I read this like multiple times a year. I love Jean Baudrillard's writings. He's a French philosopher, and he visited America in like the late 70s, 80s, and he wrote his just like thoughts about what America was like. So he would visit Vegas and the West, and he's European, French, and then he comes over and sees what we've got going on and is just commenting on it. And some of the things that he said are just so striking and like cut you to the bone, a couple of things like in your work remind me of them so much. One of the things that he says is that Americans smile a lot, even when they have nothing to smile about. And I'm like struck by these figures in the back of your pieces that have these somewhat ominous smiles going on in there. Can you tell us more about them?
Yes, that was a mushroom camping trip.
Speaking of evilizing. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I just wanted it to feel kind of like not super realistic. I wanted to feel kind of dreamlike and have like I really do like when there's a mashup between something that seems so obviously beautiful or you think you understand it immediately, and then the longer you spend with it, the more you feel like a little uncomfortable. So I was trying to go for that sort of feeling of like, where is your vantage point? You're kind of like in this pile of ferns, like looking up at these people, and as they get farther away, they're like kind of terrifying. And yeah, I just wanted it to feel like a little bit uncomfortable.
Oh, I think there's nothing that we can relate more to. Is like feeling uncomfortable, like being in this environment that's both home and also a little uneasy and eerie. Something else that Baudrillard says is that Americans are afraid of the dark. He is commenting on how that we always have the lights on everywhere. And I know like in these environments that your figures are moving around in, the light is obviously like natural light. And I think that that's both beautiful and also a little bit of an ominous feature in there too. And then a lot of your figures, I know we don't have these pieces in the show, but some of the figures in your other works are doing a lot of anarchist stuff. I love the one of your car. It's like by like kind of pulled over by like a highway, and there's fire and graffiti, people graffitiing on like road signs. And then you also have a piece of one of the just married car, with the cans and the just married written on it, and it's on fire. Tell us more about the somewhat destructive figures in your work.
Yeah. Well, I'm like pretty obsessed with fire, so I paint it like all the time. Not in like an arsonist way, just like a healthy obsession with fire. But the car pulled over on fire I was like living in my car doing residencies, and I was like having actual nightmares of my car catching on fire. So I was like, I need to actually paint this. The just married car on fire I was running in the woods and found a just married car, like completely like it had been in an accident or something, like in the middle of the woods. So I painted that, and it just felt like it needed to be on fire. It felt
my
fitting.
God. That's fantastic. Yeah, if I could go back in time and set mine on fire, I probably would. I mean, I'm sensing like this theme in your work, a lot of this, like you're kind of navigating like your space, but you're also navigating like who you are. And that obviously relates so much to what everyone else here is doing as well. Does anybody else want to chime in on this part of the conversation where we're talking about kind of like how we've been exploring? I feel like most of our work, even if it's not a literal self-portrait, like defined as a self-portrait, I think a lot of it is self-portraiture. I mean, Marianna, you touched on it a little bit, like thinking about classifying yourself possibly as like a character amongst the bags. But I feel like everyone here probably can relate.
Well, I was thinking about when we were at the show, everyone really, like, you could just point out which piece they did. I felt like everyone really looked like their work.
Like when you look like your pet.
Yeah.
That's actually really true. Now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like we should have played that game.
Oh my God. We should have made the viewers play that game tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
All you get
We're
is
going to show you the
work.
slides, and then you tell us who made which work.
Yes.
To give the bio of that person.
Yes. Yes.
Wait, Danny, I have a nosy question.
Yeah.
Where did you see the just married car in the woods?
In Vermont.
Dude, that's such
Yeah.
a Vermont thing. That's crazy.
It's yeah, I was staying at Castleton University, and it's like they have a bunch of hiking trails, and it's just along one of the hiking trails.
I really thought that was just like a metaphor.
No, that was an actual car.
That's wow.
That's
It's so relevant to
There's
your interest.
so many questions. Yeah, I'm like, also just the fact that, like, thank God you saw that. I mean,
I know. Yeah.
well,
How lucky.
you were like, what? Yay.
It's like you were foraging. You were foraging like the ants.
That's incredible.
The way these things find us.
That's incredible. I mean, and it's a bit more bulky than a plastic bag just blowing by, but
Yeah.
still a pretty good found object.
That's a little harder to come by.
Marianna can't escape the bags.
Yeah. No. They're
I will
there's probably
say
like three right
divorcees
outside of my door right now.
Divorcees are not hard to come by.
That too.
Speaking of Americana,
Right.
Yeah.
American way.
Yeah, speaking of Americana, I mean, that's a word I use a lot. And I think that artists, we typically get what it means because we are interested in these types of subjects. But in case anyone doesn't understand what Americana is, I thought we would try to define it in words if we could. The way that I think of Americana is like your very traditional American stuff. Like, it's as American as apple pie or the 4th of July or red Solo cups, that sort of thing. Does anybody disagree with me or have other contributions? What does Americana mean to you?
Bruce Springsteen is my immediate thought.
Mm-hmm.
See that?
Bruce.
I think like road trips, anything like road related feels very Americana.
Oh, absolutely. We're the only ones who really can do road trips the way that we do, because everybody else, you know, you leave from France and all of a sudden you're in England, or wait, they have to go across the channel. I don't know, my geography. They just drove right across. But no, like genuinely that Western, like the frontier, exploring the West, that's definitely very American.
Like highways and billboards are a thing that is like very much American.
That is
American.
And just like thinking about food, but just like road food and the signs for them. I am obsessed with those things. Like billboards that are like, you can go to all these fast food restaurants if you turn this way. And then you like find that like strip that every highway has, the strip of just like Wendy's, McDonald's, this gas station, that gas station. I love that stuff.
I do too.
Yes,
I love like a really.
And it feels like a long, like going west, like long road trip westwards, like thing for sure. Like, like not. I live here, so I'm of course thinking about it. But you're in the flyover zone, and in the flyover zone, that's when you start seeing those things most prominent.
Well, I used to like, we used to drive from Florida to upstate, so we would just take whatever that interstate is.
I've done that drive so many times.
Yes, I've been on that drive.
Wait, is that what
is that 95?
95.
Yeah, 95.
Yeah.
95.
95.
South of the border is like one of my favorite places.
Yes.
Wait, did you say south of the border?
South of the border. It's like a roadside attraction. Have you been?
It's a rest stop.
I haven't been, but I know
It's a rest stop. Yeah,
it's
in South Carolina.
Great.
South of the border.
And it's
North Carolina.
Mexican food, right?
It's
it's like
American.
It's twisted. It's like the most American, like, but they definitely have like, I think like a giant sombrero or something.
Yep.
Like it's not like a good place, but it's
not authentic.
It's strange. No.
It's like in the same way when you're on the road and you're in Texas, you go to a Buc-ee's. Like if you don't,
it's kind of
100% kind of deal.
It's like the Cracker Barrel. It's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Americana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
But all of
that
it is
there's
like iconography and
Yes.
like advertising and like, yeah, it's like you've got like I mean, like the smiley face or like all of it. It's just very like, here's the icon. It's recognizable. Like you'll know it from a mile away when you're like driving down the interstate, and it's meant to like convey like the whole idea. But it's like the American dream too. Like it's like
Yep.
it's like a it's advertising. It's like
Yeah.
we have this here.
Do y'all
You
It's
know,
a brand.
do y'all
Yeah,
think
America is a brand.
whether it's real or not, I don't know.
Americana is just a need to push for comfort? That's kind of what I feel about it. Like Americana, like people want to believe in that idealism of America, and it's just a digestible comfortness of what people can view America to be for themselves is sometimes Americana.
Oh yeah, it makes me think of I know, yeah, Tick Tick Boom, which is the Jonathan Larson musical where he talks about you know, because Jonathan Larson, he's the musician who wrote Rent, super queer, and but he also he like struggled with, you know, whether or not he was going to make it as a Broadway success or whether he was going to have to go into something like advertising and use his powers for writing like jingles or something. And when thinking about America, he's thinking like the open road, the promise of a new day, that sort of thing. I feel like is so embedded in us from an early age, but then there's like a darkness to it too, you know, because a lot of the billboards along the highways that we're talking about, they're also, you know, we'll see the billboards that are talking about essentially apocalyptic stuff. Like think about the Phoebe Bridgers song. She talks about seeing all the billboards that say the end is here or the end is near. That sort of stuff is also like really eerie in a very specifically American way, I think.
Yeah, there's also like there's a lot of like, I don't know, scary movies that involve the long strips of highway.
Yeah. And we have a lot of serial killers who would attack along the highways.
Yeah. Americana, a serial killer.
Americana.
So when we're looking at Americana through the queer lens, what are we doing? I mean, I would argue that you know, queerness is not new. So as long as there's been America, there's been queerness as well. And even before that, I mean, we were in the caves at some point, I'm sure. But also, I do feel like there is an argument these days about what it is to be American, what it is to have this like an identity in this country, and fighting for your rights to have that identity not questioned. And so yeah, I would love to hear what you think about the queer lens being applied to Americana, or a queerness already being baked in there. I mean, take Bruce Springsteen. His original album cover of Born in the USA had a handkerchief in the back pocket, which, as we know, is very much flagging. But then it got changed, photoshopped to be a hat later.
That's I still envision it as a bandana.
Yes, it's like a Mandela effect thing almost, except it was real, I believe.
That's so funny that they were like, we can't have this Photoshop.
Yeah, they're like, wait, he's not flagging, because what he would have been flagging would have been something I think the boss would not have been into, because the hanky coat is specific.
I actually went to a lecture once. This artist that I used to work for in Philly, her name is Zoe Strauss. She's a photographer, and she did a whole talk at the Philadelphia Museum of Art about her work as like a lesbian photographer, and like Bruce Springsteen as her like as like one of her primary influences. And like I'm not, this is like all I'm going to bring to this, like to the Bruce Springsteen part of this conversation, but like, because like I don't really remember like how it all intersected, but I just remember being like, this is fucking awesome. Like it was just so great. I was like, wow, queers love Bruce.
We do.
And I think he loves them
like-
too. Us too.
He is such a pinnacle of masculinity, right? Because he has the rugged blue jeans driving down the highway thing, but he also has this vulnerability, in the lyrics and stuff that would
Very
read
campy.
on a different, different end of the spectrum for sure. And there's kind of a camp to it, right?
But there's a line
like-
with this camp. There's a sincerity with this camp, which
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
tells it a little bit.
Or it's like it's very like over the top. Like he'll perform for like 4 hours. It's like it's
I saw a Bruce show. It was a horrible idea.
why?
Because it was just 4 hours.
Oh,
Too old.
you were like, I was not anticipating this much commitment.
And it's not a performance. It's just him singing songs about insane musicians. Like, it's all just him reminiscing, which is so
Oh
weird.
no. I've never been to a Bruce show, but people are like, it's amazing. It's theatrical.
It's like being on a porch with Bruce, but like I didn't sign up for that.
Yeah, if it was more
Same.
intimate with a bottle of Jack, like 1-to-1, then maybe, but not in a room of like another 100,000 people, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, fair.
You're like,
Yeah.
call me next time. Like I need to know ahead of time that this is gonna be happening.
Should I bring a
Oh my god.
bag? Like,
I have like a really dark thought, and let me know
Please.
how you guys
Go there.
what you guys think of this. So I'm thinking about open road being on the highway, and like America gives off this sort of idea that this is like this is the freest place you can be. And we love now especially to be like, everyone can be so gay here and it's so chill. We love the gays. And I think about being on the open road as like a very queer presenting person, or especially like if you're a part of a queer couple or queer family and you're in any of these like rest stops, or like sort of you stop to get food and it's like 3 a.m. and you walk in and you're being queer, how it's like actually not safe. I think about Americana as having this idea of safety that isn't actually true.
Oh
yeah,
my
it's
god.
true for like a fraction of the population.
Yeah.
Primarily white, straight men.
Yes.
Like I mean, I experienced that feeling of safety here in Brooklyn at a drag show with my friends. I don't experience that level of safety, or that the like perception or feeling of safety in, I don't know, like I don't know, anywhere.
We still very much have to create our own spaces to feel safe.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that in one of the reasons that I didn't separate from my partner I should have way sooner, but I did not, in part because it was somewhat of a shelter, like I went on very many road trips with him and I didn't really feel unsafe because I was with a white cishet man. And so, he did all the dangerous stuff, or I was always protected by him or whatever. And considering doing a lot of things on my own has been absolutely terrifying because it doesn't feel nearly as safe, especially in the South. Because we don't have the spaces that Brooklyn, New York, that sort of thing would have.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
I have to calculate out where I go to the bathroom every road trip back home to my parents in Indiana, because it's a matter of, well, where am I not going to have a conversation of walking in with a dress into a bathroom and not have a lot, if not the entire place, having a look and or very forward wanting to feel like they're entitled conversation with me about it. It's not something that I hated even like to say it, but like even when I was like visiting for McColl, nothing with the building felt odd whatsoever. But then going outside and when I was on my own, there's definitely moments where like me and James would be walking around and I would have to like brace myself and like about it for a minute of, okay, who's in the building? Who's looking at me as I'm going in? Are they looking at my decision? Well, here we are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Think about that just with body hair too.
Of course. Yeah.
Where am I allowed to have armpits?
Yeah, it's like a lot easier to just like not do like, yeah, I mean, I think it's like it's a real risk to like present queer outside, like if you're not in like, I don't know, even in New York, but like especially outside of the cities, the major cities, it's really a risk. But it also feels inauthentic not to, so it's like you have to like weigh those things. And that's kind of what I mean by the like American dream, where it's like there's this whole there's like a promise of like endless possibility. It's kind of like why my family immigrated here. It was like, oh, in Brazil things are really tough and things are really like, it's just a harder life, which like it actually is. Like it is harder to be there. All of these things that we're talking about like are harder, but then you're like, it's been like I think that was like a real learning curve over the last like 30 some years to be like, oh, like that promise is not quite what it was supposed to be, or like, it's a little overblown, a little overhyped.
Or conditional.
Very conditional, deeply conditional.
And there's a lot
That's actually a really good point. That's the word I was,
Yeah, there's a lot of personal responsibility wrapped into it, where it's basically like, well, you have this opportunity. And we joke about me saying that my dog, when I take my dog outside, I'm giving her opportunities. It's like the American dream. They say, you have an opportunity, and if it doesn't work out for you, that's your fault. And there's such a contrast to what the queer community actually does, which is like we take care of each other, whereas the country itself doesn't really take care of us. Like even thinking about healthcare, I mean, everybody, queer or not, can relate to the idea that we, it's a privilege to live because we're not just given basic healthcare, that sort of thing. And here we are going into our very political portion of the show, but genuinely, no, it is a privilege to be able to be yourself and to be safe, and we don't always have access to that.
I mean, like presenting as a trans person, but then also getting trans healthcare. It's all a whole thing also. That's even harder to be able to present it the way you want.
Yes, and as many of us know, even that can be questioned amongst folks who are supposed to be the safe people to turn to. So, there's constantly these groups of, supposedly safe people who it's that performative activism or, performative values of saying that you're for inclusivity, but then questioning a gender marker on a healthcare form, that sort of thing. And I think that is a part of the queer experience, is unfortunately, a constant fighting tooth and nail just to exist. That can be really, what's the word I'm looking for? Demoralizing at times. So I'm so grateful for groups like this where we can really support each other and like be ourselves and not have any of that questioned. It feels amazing to just be able to be oneself.
The opening and then like the surrounding moments where we all got to hang out just felt so good.
So good.
Yeah. Because it was like we could be what we wanted and who we were.
Yeah.
I was talking to James about that. Where, like, I wouldn't like. It's not often that like you travel for. It's like it's a 10-person group show. And it's not often that you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like make. I mean, I've never like bought a plane ticket to go
No.
to the opening of like a big group show,
Mm-mm.
but I was like, no, this is the kind of thing this is like the kind of event that is important to be at, especially like, you know, in the art world where things can sometimes like just not kind of feel. Yeah, well, I don't know. It's like, this is where I'm like, yeah, this is what it's for. This is what it's about. This is like where I feel like I'm making, it's like, this is like why I wanted to do this in the first place.
Absolutely. And so many of us showed up, and I'm like, yeah, I was just thinking the whole time, this doesn't happen.
Amazing.
I don't even go to group shows in the city. Like, we're like all in Charlotte now, and I'm like, I made all of these friends in like 24 hours.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I've known like everybody's work, but then to like get to meet in person and like have these chats has been just like really special.
Yeah, Taylor.
Yeah.
Huge like hats off to you for putting together this entire group of us that all really desperately needed to have this cross dialogue, and of course like it's you putting together all of us that really needed to like hang out in Charlotte. So like so good.
I felt so rewarded.
I mean, I think
yeah.
Sorry. I mean, I think I selfishly needed it too, because like I've mentioned previously, it's been a really, really tough year, and I feel like I was questioning a lot about like where I even belonged in the world. And I really enjoyed the experience of spring break last year because a lot of people, you're kind of forced together in that environment, but that's a much larger scale. And so I think that we've done something truly special here by like doing something that was on a smaller scale, but it also felt like a lot deeper. And that was in part thankfully, due to the collaboration with, I want to make sure I say her name correctly, so I pulled up, it's Alex Bearwald-Simard, who led the big gay picnic on the lawn of McColl during the opening. And then, of course, Beck Douglas, who's the youth programs director at McColl, and put together the activities of the friendship bracelets. And then we also pulled in your temporary tattoos, Marianna. And I feel like we did something else. We're just doing like a lot of things. Oh, Beck made pronoun pins for everybody that were free and accessible. And it was such a wonderful experience. There's this young kid, he's like 7. And he came in and he was digging through the bin, and he was choosing which his pronoun pins were. And he has pronouns, he, him, but he went with the pin that said, "Ask me my pronouns," because he said that he felt comfortable having conversations with people about pronouns. And it's just like, this kid's 7. So it gives me a lot of hope for the up and coming generation.
Hey, little one. All right.
He's very precocious. He also looked at Colin's piece, and he said, "What's he doing?" And then he said he probably shouldn't say, which was a really good choice. But anyway, but no, it was a very just a supportive environment, and that's all a lot thanks to y'all too, because had y'all not shown up, then I mean, like it took all of us to make that happen.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me set it on. We haven't put on Cassidy's yet. Yeah, so I think that's all that I had. Maybe in closing out our conversation, we can hear about what's next for everyone. I know I personally am interested in doing more projects that I would consider almost like social practice. I feel like this exhibition was in part related to social practice, because the picnic was a part of what we were doing. The community of us coming together was a part of what we were doing. It wasn't just putting art on walls, but it was about having these conversations and these connections that we hope like last. We're creating a chosen family in a way. But I know that a lot of you also have other projects coming up. Like a couple of you are doing some spring break stuff. So maybe we just go down and hear what everyone's up to as we're bringing this to a close. So Paul, I know that you're working on a lot of stuff. You just got back from Taipei.
Yeah, so outside of American Honey, I have comfort food that's happening right now in Taipei, Taiwan at Gallery Chow, which has been an amazing experience. That may lead me doing more projects over in Taipei, which I'm really excited about. I'll have my first solo curatorial debut opening up next spring break coming up, Dead Center, Tales from the Midwest. I'm bringing a collective of ceramicists from Kansas City that are all exceptionally good in clay, and they're some of my favorite people in the city. So I can't wait for them to be showcasing their work in New York. I think all of them are ballers. I'll be in the Clay Car You Know Me Invitational in Iowa City, Iowa. And then I'm making the transition from the 9 to 5, and I'm about to go into a solo studio practice. And so I'm trying to quiet life down a little bit. I love Belger Art Center, but I'll be stepping down relatively soon this month, and I'll be starting my own solo studio.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Congratulations on all of the good stuff. That is so much good stuff. I'm also going to, while everyone's chatting, I'm going to put people's websites in the chat so that anybody who's watching can have a quick link to click over. I'm also going to be sharing some other links in a moment, but I'm just going to start doing the individual artists as we go. So Danny, while I do Paul's website, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you have coming up in the next month?
Yeah, doing spring break for the first time, which I'm really excited about. A little intimidated, but very excited. And then I have an installation up in Germantown for another month called A Dyke Cabin of One's Own. And it's like a queer motorcycle cabin. And that's it.
Yes. And wasn't that one featured on Hyperallergic?
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's got one more month. So anyone who's passing through Germantown, check it out.
Great. We're definitely going to pop that in the chat as well. And a solo at spring break. That's going to be really exciting. I'm so excited to see what you put together. I mean, you've been doing some great immersive stuff for a while now, and seeing it on that platform is going to be awesome too. Yeah. Marianna, what you got coming up?
So I have a show right now that's up it's like I have a couple of works in a group show in LA right now called Greenhouse at the Torrance Art Museum. Anyway, that's up until mid-September. And then I have my next show is going to be in Philly, but we're currently in conversation about the dates. Like it was going to be this fall, but so it might still be in October. I'll let you know if it is, but it might also just be in the spring. We're kind of like trying to sort that stuff out. So that is coming up at Blah Blah Gallery in Philly. And otherwise, I'm just here trying to. I moved into I moved my studio home, and I'm trying to like still get it, get into the swing of things in a new studio. It always takes me a little while. But y'all are always welcome.
Also moving within the city, that's quite a task. So
yeah, not for the weak of heart.
And you just had a show,
Faint of Heart.
The Faint of Heart, yes.
The Weak of Heart.
Or what is it? The Young of Heart. That's at the beginning of Wizard of Oz, which is
all
also
of it.
gay.
Yeah.
And Marianna, you just had a show close out in Savannah, right?
Yes, at Clio. Clio, the project space in Savannah, Georgia. They are amazing. Check out their programming. Love them so much. That was an incredible show. It's been really fun to be in the South a lot this summer. My bags have gotten to visit a couple of southern cities. It's been really fun.
And your hair has interacted with the humidity okay?
It's been, it just does what it does. It's growing out. It's just doing whatever it feels like on any given day.
All right, and Nic, tell us what you've got going on.
So my work itself has been traveling this year around with you in Charlotte. I have a bunch of work in Seoul right now at Art Space Hawa, and I just had a piece in San Francisco at Hashimoto Contemporary. I've sort of been in recovery of doing a lot of work in 2 years so I'm having a down year, which has been really great because I've been researching new books to work on. I've been looking for children's books where food is really like shown in a good light, where it brings people together. A lot of it are more independent publishers or books from other countries. So that's been really fun. And I've also been collecting a lot of kids' toys, like fake, those like fake grocery aisles that they do, or like,
Yeah.
like little fake laundry machines.
Uh-huh.
So I'm gathering materials, and I don't quite know where it's going to go, but I'm envisioning doing a lot more sculptural elements as part of the canvases. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that would be incredible. I mean, I love your we talked more specifically about your sculptural paintings, but I know that you're no stranger to sculpture, making things like you mentioned earlier, like the candy, but also your LaCroix, your paper mache LaCroix boxes, in my opinion, are iconic. And people can see those on your website that I just shared in the chat. Those are amazing too. So I'm excited to see what you cook up. That was also not an intended pun, but good art takes time. I'm also taking a little bit of some time for a quiet season. I think last year was very, very busy. And then this year it's been a lot of flailing to just survive. And so I'm kind of interested in like a very slow period of time to just let some things simmer. And I'm trying to remind myself that I don't have to be productive at all times, that maybe purpose can change depending on what time of day it is. Maybe the purpose right now is to connect with artists, and maybe the purpose tomorrow is to pay rent by sitting at a front desk, and that's okay. Talking about the American dream, coming back to that, it's an act of rebellion to take any time to yourself and rest. So I hope that you get some good restorative time.
Oh yeah, I mean, we also forget that we have to actually have inspiration.
Yeah.
And if we're just
Totally.
goes, where's the inspiration coming from?
Yeah, it's like
a lesson that I
musicians.
learn over and over, where I'm like, I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted, I'm like, I'm not feeling connected to my work or to my studio, and then it's like, go to sleep.
Yeah.
Like, just go to bed. Go to bed right now.
Yeah.
Get some rest, touch some grass maybe after you've rested. Like
Yeah.
all of that stuff is important.
Right.
Yeah. Capitalism.
Eat some really good food.
Yes.
She's a bitch.
Yes.
Working our bodies to the bone.
Yeah, we have to live life at some point in order to make art about life. I mean, most artists, like musicians, when they make albums, the first album is amazing because it's about life, and then the second album is about, oh my God, I'm famous now. How do I adjust to that? And it's just not really interesting anymore. So we have to spend some time living. Yeah. Okay. Well, what's coming up next at McColl Center, just to let everyone know, first of all, if you have not checked out the rest of the show, you should. The show is up through September 15th for sure. On September 14th, which is this QR code, we have Family Day, which is a free event for families. It's, I think, 10 to 1. I could be wrong on the time frame. But it's free, and we're doing activities that are based on art from the show. So we're doing some felt portraits, like Colin J. Radcliffe's felt piece. We're going to create some vessels that kids can glaze, like Paul Maloney's piece. And we're also looking at doing some maybe landscape inspired paintings, since we have so many great painters like Danny and James Parker Foley amongst us. And if you have any other things, you can let us know. But okay, this QR code is for buying stuff from the show. All the stuff from the show is for sale mostly. I think there's 1 or 2 things that's not for sale technically, but it's all available. And when you buy things from the show, you're supporting artists because we get a huge cut of that. You're also supporting McColl Center, who gets the other percentage. And McColl Center is an arts nonprofit, and we need to support programs such as Family Day that we were just talking about. So please support us. There's artworks ranging from small amounts all the way up. So there's a wide range, something for everybody to take home. And we also have some free stuff that you can come get at McColl Center. We have Marianna Peragallo's temporary tattoos. We have coloring sheets from Catalina Cheng, and we have friendship bracelets galore, and a lot of fun. So thank you for tuning in tonight. And thank you all artists for this wonderful conversation. I want to say congratulations to all of you. Everybody that I've spoken to has been thrilled to see the show and has been so inspired by your work. So really, thank you for trusting us with it.
Thank you, Taylor. And thank you, Doris and Beck and everyone at McColl. Y'all have been just the best.
Thank you.
Huge thanks.
Yes. And this recording will be available for everyone. So if you popped in late or whatever, we will post the link at some point somewhere. Just, reach out to us at McColl. All right, cool. Y'all have a good night. Go get some rest, and we'll be talking soon.
All right, bye.
Bye.